hello, everyone, and welcome to the script to story podcast with Marguerite Onery and me, Ross Coleman. Today we have the honor of speaking to Áine Ghlinn, poet, journalist, and I for children on your very welcome.
Goramila, I'm delighted to be here.
Áine, for this podcast series, our followers are listening in, and they are, what we're doing is we're talking to people who have drifted a little bit from the Irish language. They had learnt it in school, and then they went to college and everything was through the medium of English, went into the workplace and it's through the medium of English, but they want to come back, somehow get back into the Irish language. They may now be sending their children to school through the Irish language, and they want to find a way back. And so we're trying to say to people, you know, as Patricia Ford said to us just recently, she said, this is your language. You know, it's okay to speak your own language. This is your language. And I think that was a really important message, that I think unless we think that we're speaking perfectly, that we feel that we shouldn't speak.
Yes, and that is such an error for people, because no matter how well or how badly you speak the language, you are still benefiting from the language. To me, the Irish language is much more than a language. I was reared with English as a first language, but with Irish as a fairly early second language. So in many ways, I grew up comfortable in both. I grew up reading in both. And I feel that I have gained so much from that, apart altogether from the actual language. It's a window on a culture, and it opens up a whole new world. And my own children were the same, that they were reared bilingually. I spoke Irish to them here at home. Their dad spoke English to them. And they grew up, while now they live their lives in both languages, one more in Irish than in English, the other two more in English than in Irish, but they still have that window on a culture. And what I would say to people is, go back to it. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. If you go abroad to Spain or France and you have whatever amount of the language you have, you're not afraid of anyone criticizing you. You just use what you have. So I would say, if you really want to go back and use Duolingo and revise your Irish on that. I know lots of people during the pandemic who used Duolingo, and there are apparently more people learning Irish on Duolingo than any other language here in Ireland, which is fascinating. And I know two people who've actually got back to being fluent by using it. And the other thing I would say to people is read children's books. Picture books are for everyone.
That's what I wanted to say. Is Philahoo, you're a poet, and I think children love a rhyme.
Yeah.
And as an adult, if I want to, I think they pick up rhymes, they learn them quite easily. And if I tell a story to a child in Irish, now my pronunciation of the language mightn't be excellent. Am I messing up that child's chances of learning the language properly?
I don't believe you are. I think that we should all, I mean, and my work is, as a writer, I write for children, I write poetry for adults, poetry for children, I write drama for children, I do workshops with children, and I come across all levels of Irish. I go into classrooms at times and I see teachers with all levels of Irish. But I'm not going to sit around whinging if somebody is mispronouncing something. I think get it out there, use it. And if there's an error, so be it. But I am a great believer in reading stories to children. I think stories are the door into any language. And when I was a child, I read nonstop, mostly in English because there weren't that many books around for children in Irish, but I read whatever I could in Irish as well. And I'm just such a believer, and I know you've spoken to Patricia Ford, and she would be coming from the same mindset as myself, that read books for children. Children are literate in every language. They don't need a language to be literate. They just love the pictures.
Yeah.
And the pictures will tell the story as you're reading the story. Poetry too, as you mentioned, rhyme is great for children because they rhyme things off without knowing or caring what they're rhyming. And language just, I believe that language goes in, that it goes into the head. Somehow it goes into the heart, into the ears, into the brain, and children just soak it up.
It's funny because we were speaking, Ross and I were speaking to, I hope I'm not jumping the queue. Ross, you have the next question, but I'm really interested in this piece. We were speaking to Des Kenny yesterday, and he was saying that he reads Irish language picture books to the really young grandchildren he has. And he says he knows they don't understand a word of what he's saying, but they're picking it up. They're picking up the language unbeknownst to themselves. And he said that even radio, he puts on the radio and it's going in. So I think I suppose if many people want to return to the language, just start introducing it somewhere along the line. Absolutely.
If you have a tiny baby, do you say, oh gosh, I'd better not speak English now because the baby has no language yet? You don't.
Yeah.
You speak and you read to that baby. And I'm a believer in reading to babies from the time they're born. Indeed, I'm a believer in reading to babies before they're born at all. I think I was reading picture books aloud to mine while they were still in the womb, and simply because I love books so much. But if you read to a baby in whatever languages you have, and I don't believe in stopping at Irish. I think we have such diversity in this country at the moment that I think it's absolutely wonderful to see books in every language around.
And what they have to be ethical books, because I'm aware that you recorded one of your books. I think so. And so as an audiobook, and I was just wondering, do you believe that audio books are a great way to get kids invested in reading? Or
I think so, yes, but personally I prefer physical books. I love the feel of a book. I'm not even a passionate Kindle user. I have a Kindle, and every time I pick it up, if I'm going on holidays, I have to recharge it and I have to search for the charger because I use it so little. I love the physicality of a book. I love the turning of a page. I love for children that they will read the pictures. And I remember, just going off the point slightly, I'll come back to your question, Ross, but going off the point slightly, I remember when one of my children was very young, I was reading a book called An Bhó Dionn by Mary Arrigan. It might be out of print now, I don't know, but I was reading Mary Arrigan's book. And I remember at the time, the story was going on, but down at the corner of every page, there was a little mouse responding to the story. And I was reading the story, and my son, who was maybe 2 or 3 at the time, his only interest was the story of the mouse. So he was reading the picture. And that to me is so important. Now, the funny part of it was that then I was reviewing that book, and I remember reviewing, I think it might have been for the Irish Times. I was reviewing some Irish language books at the time. And I told the story of what had happened with the little mouse. And about a week later, I got a card in the Poet from the author, Mary Arrigan. And it was the little mouse holding a big placard which said, Coil Fuyera, fame at last. And I actually have that card framed in my kitchen, because I think it was so important. That I also think it's very important for children to pick their own books. And if they go to the library and they pick a book that turns out to be wrong, well, they won't pick a wrong one the next time. But if they're picking a book for their reason, I don't think we should be deciding what children read. That's, we tend very easily to censor for what we think are all the best reasons in the world. So I think, going back to your question, Ross, about audiobooks, yes, I recorded a few Cluslauer for Coshlifa. I think 2 of them, I think Dado, and I think the other one might be Hatazu Vamo. They're both, Dado would be teen fiction. Hatazu Vamo would be anything from, I think, about age 9 or 10 up to 15 or 16. But both of those are available as an audiobook. But I still personally would prefer the physicality of a book. And I know that some people have told me that what they did is they used the audiobook to supplement their pronunciation.
How hard is it for you to narrate? Like, how difficult is it when you're narrating your own book to hold, I suppose, the energy and the attention to it? Does it take like stop, start? Does it take a long time to get to the end of a book?
Not as much as I expected. I suppose I'm very lucky because I've come from a background in broadcasting.
Okay.
And that I spent a number of years working in radio, doing work. I worked in current affairs for a while. I did a stint as a Dáil reporter in my early days, which I wasn't passionate about because politics, I love politics, but I'm not as good on politics as I would be on magazine programs or books programs. But I worked in journalism for about 15 years, I'd say, in total, and then went into a bit of lecturing and more writing and workshops, and now full-time between writing and workshops. But because I had a background in radio, I'm, even now as we're recording, while I have no responsibility, I'm looking at my background, I'm hearing my voice, I'm looking at my response, I'm looking at my facial response, because you can't go away from what you're trained in. So when I was reading, I had a producer with me for both the audio recordings, and he was listening, but so was I. And what we did is we would do maybe 3 or 4 chapters break, 3 or 4 chapters break. But we did the whole lot in each case, we did the whole lot in, now it was 2 different reporters or 2 different producers. One of them came here to do it. The other, I went to his house. And I think we did the lot, in one case in a morning, and the other here in an evening, in about 3 or 4 hours.
That's impressive. I thought this would take weeks. I really did, because when you think of the energy to hold an energy, I'm not a very good reader because I've suffered a brain injury, so I've lost my reading fluency as a result of it. So I struggle with reading, which is something that I really miss, because I used to eat books, and now I struggle to get through books. But I wish I had the fluency back to be able to read clearly and with that fluency. But it's beautiful to see that it is possible for an author to read their book, and hold that attention and that energy and get through it in the morning or in an evening. It's a
Yes.
lovely thing to hear, because I think for people who purchase the audiobooks, they love to hear the actual author reading their own story, because it really adds something special to it.
Yeah.
So it's wonderful to know.
Yeah, well, I quite enjoy recording, and I loved radio, and I really enjoyed it as a career. I've probably been very lucky in my life in that when I was a child, people asked me what did I want to be, and I had a list of things I wanted to be, and I've done and I'm doing all of them. So there was nothing on my list that I haven't given a try to, including little bits of acting. And that also comes into the recording. That makes a huge difference. I've taken small roles in a few radio plays for Radio na Lifa, all on an amateur basis. I acted with Ashdory Bulfin for years. I acted with a drama group down the country when I lived down the country for a few years. So all of those things, they all pull together for recording an audiobook.
Ross, did you have any other question you'd like to ask Áine?
No, I'm fine for the moment.
Áine, what I would love to know is that if I'm a person who has drifted from the Irish language and now I want to come back to it as an adult, and I'm watching a bit of TG Cahir, I'm Radio na Gaeltachta, there are some things that would appeal to me, others that I suppose I would get in Radio na Lifa because it's more kind of youthful. I don't know, there's a youthful vibe to it, and there's a lot, not taken from Radio na Gaeltachta in any way, because there's fascinating stories being told on Radio na Gaeltachta. I listen to both, but I'm listening to we say Radio na Lifa, Radio na Gaeltachta. I'm tuning in every now and again to documentaries on TG Cahir or whatever, the sport on TG Cahir, or music. My father listens to Glór an Opry, I think at the moment he's listening to that, or he loves that music. Now, when I know that my father's mother had very little English, but she wasn't allowed to speak Irish in the home. Her husband wouldn't let her because it was a poor man's language or whatever. So my father, when we were young, when we go to Connemara with him when he was working in Connemara, everybody out there knew who he was, so they'd speak Irish to him, but he'd reply to them in English. So I think for me was quite strange. He knew everything they were saying, but he hadn't the confidence to reply. And I think that confidence was broken at that generation, and we haven't recovered really in our confidence. And I wonder how do we do this? How do we build our confidence? Where do we start? As an Irish, younger Irish, people from my age group, I won't say what age I am.
Well, I think you're probably younger than me, so you're safe.
Okay. But even Ross's age group, people in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s, how do we give them, how do they gain that confidence? What do they do?
And sorry, I'd like to add to that, So I have an Irish degree from Trinity, and my written Irish is very good, and I can understand everything, but I'm terrified to speak the language, and I remember when I had to bring you last week to organize this podcast, I was really, afraid to talk on the phone, So
agus ví tú anwa her an phone.
Good. So yeah, I'd be interested to know, what advice you would have to encourage people to be more confident.
Okay, I think, well, as we said there a moment ago, éist le radiona Gaeltachta.
Yeah.
Éist le radiona Lifa. Radiona Gaeltachta, I love. And there are, if you flick through the listings for Radiona Gaeltachta, you'll find certain programs where not all the contributors are Gaeltacht speakers or native speakers. And I've sometimes said to people that a program that is very good to start with is Túsáite. It's a program I do little bits of reviews for from time to time, but it's current affairs and a mix of light and heavy. So the content is very mixed. And you'll get a little bit of sport, you'll get different things every day of the week, a little bit on books. And that can be a good place. TG Cahir can be great. The difficulty I sometimes have with TG Cahir is that even as somebody who's totally fluent in Irish, your eyes drift to the subtitles.
Oh.
And I don't like reading a program. I like to see it and hear it. I don't want to be reading the program. So the other thing, and it brings me to my role at the moment as Children's Laureate. I have a big project as Laureate Nanog, and the project as Laureate Nanog is a Buska Laurlana. And our aim is, now when I say our, it's not just me, I might be Laureate Nanog, but there's a team of people who are working with me and behind me. And our aim is that we're going to bring a Buska Laurlana to as many schools as possible, because even in Gaelscoilne and Gaeltacht schools, a lot of children stop reading Os Gaeilge at a certain age. A lot of them, when they move away, they move into an English-speaking world more than the Irish-speaking world. And outside of school, for a lot of Gaelscoilne, I'm living in Dublin, for a lot of Gaelscoilne in Dublin, the world the children live in outside outside Gath and Escola is a world of English. So the aim with this is to bring Irish language books into schools. Now for Gaeltacht and Gaeltacht schools and Gaelscoilne, we'll be looking mainly at books that will suit the 8-9-year-old upwards, rather than books for smaller children, because the Gaelscoilne and Gaeltacht schools, they're reading at the early age. So we're looking at trying to encourage them to read. For English language schools, and we don't know yet in terms of funding how many English language schools will be able to cover, whether schools will have to apply. It depends on how far the funding will stretch, and we're getting some partnership funding, and we're hoping we might get more and extend it further. But whatever number of schools we cover in the first rollout, our idea is that for there we'll go for the Buska Laurlana for younger children, for the English-speaking schools, because even right up to 6th class, there are ways of reading a picture book that are engaging and enjoyable. And if that's their level of reading Os Gaeilge, our aim is get them reading in Irish. And that's one thing to start people off. And I would say to adults, go out there, buy a picture book for yourself and read it. Buy a simple story and read it. Buy a story for an 8 or 9-year-old, read it. And you'll find yourself getting back into it very quickly. The other thing, and this is part of the Laureate project as well, so I'm sorry to steal the opportunity to give this a bit of publicity. The other thing we're doing is we have a project going called Give Leabhar Gaeilge. Give Leabhar Gaeilge. Now there is a project that goes called Love Leabhar Gaeilge. We couldn't use, well, that's probably an even better, catchier title. We obviously couldn't steal theirs, but we decided to go for Give Leabhar Gaeilge. And the idea is we're asking every adult to go out and buy a Leabhar Gaeilge for children, for a child you know. It could be a book of poetry, it could be a book of songs, it could be a storybook, a picture book, anything, but give a gift of Gaeilge in the form of a Leabhar Gaeilge to a child that you know. And we made videos, we made loads of videos for Seachtain na Gaeilge, we made videos for Christmas, and we'll be doing the same again this coming Christmas. We don't know if we'll still be in lockdown because everything had to go online. And so that I think is a great way to keep things going, because as an adult, if you read the book to yourself and to the child, both will gain.
I think that's a fantastic thing that you're doing, because I remember when I was in Scolignáid ar fear Blin Owan, Gaelscoil Ngalia for Cairn na Gaillimhe. When I was in, lots of people know about the Jazz Primary. That's one of those in the Jazz Secondary. They're quite famous schools in Galway. But my mother sent me there for 1 year. I don't know why, to learn Irish. But I noticed the school, they were in our history books, there were graphic novels. And it was a fast way for me to learn the language because I saw the pictures. And I think that's a great thing that you've just said. And I love Tribes Press to be involved in it. We have a number of, only a small number because we're a small publishing house, a small number of Irish language books here that we'd love to be a part of the Give Leabhar Gaeilge initiative. So I think that's a nice way to end this. We can say to people out there, go buy a...
Ceannig leabhar Gaeilge the fáiste I the héal.
Yeah. Gur míle maith agad Áine Ghlinn. It was wonderful talking to you, and we hope we can talk to you again sometime. But for now, our podcast episode has just come to an end. Thank you very much for being part of this, and the very best of luck in your job as Laureate na Lo going forward. Thank you again. Take care.
Gur míle maith agad.